Well, howdy, folks, and welcome back to another episode of Follow the Leader. I'm your host, Lee Larson, and while this hotel room is a little bit different, I am in a hotel in Billings, Montana, out of town for a conference, and joining me from Whitefish, Montana, the other side of the state, Reverend Jon Umbdenstock of Whitefish, Montana, United Methodist. Welcome. Howdy. Howdy, howdy. Well, folks, I'm really glad that Reverend Jon is here. Like I said, he pastors a United Methodist Church in Whitefish, Montana. Come across one another online, and he's got a Substack that I highly
Howdy.
suggest y'all
Glad
go
to be
check
here.
out following this call because call podcast chat whatever we're doing. I know it's weird, because he wrote on. Christian Zionism, which we talk about over here with Christian nationalism, U.S. military chaplaincy, and now it's like everyone is coming together. Like it's and so many things that people study or are passionate about are all starting to come together in this horrifying national global puzzle. And really am looking forward to hearing your thoughts and perspectives. So Jon, Reverend Jon. Jon, how would you like to be Jon? And he did say that folks call him John the Baptist, even though he's Methodist. So that's a funny one too, folks. But in your article, Hot Takes, The Evil of Christian Zionism, really well done. I
You
appreciate
can
the
call me John.
caveat. In
That's
fact,
fine.
let's begin there. When we talk about Zionism, when we talk about all of this, are we talking about all of Judaism? What are we specifically saying when we are saying Zionism?
Well, that is such a blanket term. And when you're talking about the entirety of it, especially when it's referring to Judaism, I am definitely not the expert. That's where well, I'm not the expert in any of this, but I am addressing the Christian aspect of it. A couple reasons. So I guess I can give it a little bit of a blanket. There's different ways of looking at what does Zionism mean. To some, and I'm basing this off of conversations I've had with Jewish friends. So sometimes it can mean something as simple as the Jewish people have their homeland, ancestrally speaking, in Israel. A version of Zionism is that they have a right to return to their homeland. Some might say at all political costs. That might be a more extreme Zionism, and we're seeing some of the political ramifications of that. Some just might be that they have a right to exist as a people. It's very broad, but I'm a Christian. As a non-Jewish person, I don't have a lot that I feel that I have the authority to speak on with broad Zionism because our own house is a mess. And with our own Christian house being a mess, who am I to be poking at another religion's internal conversations? In fact, for those who follow the lectionary schedule in the church, the calendar of the readings, this oh, actually, no, it's not the lectionary part. It's our Bible study. We're going through the Gospel of Matthew's, like verse by verse, and we just got to the part of not judging and not trying to remove a speck in your neighbor's eye, and you got a log in your own. And so, kind of similar. Our Christian house right now is in disarray, and that's where I'm
No.
really
Well,
interested in
and
focusing on.
that's
So, Christian Zionism is
you said
different
that your
from
congregation
general
is
Zionism, and that's
going
what that
for the
article was about.
gospel.
And yeah, it was
Um,
the
how
first thing
are
I wrote
some
about
of
in that article was that
your
caveat.
congregants
So I will end
concerns
there and let
with
you
the war? What
guide
are you
what you want
seeing?
to pick at in
Um,
that.
or even like, yeah, how are they seeing this Christian Zionism, and what are the conversations at your church right now?
there's definitely a lot of concern just about everything that's happening politically, whether it's the nation, the world, or even locally, Flathead Valley or Montana. Um, I don't like to, label a congregation in like broad terms like conservative or progressive, but our group is definitely more on the justice is a concern to them. They are very concerned about the injustices that they're seeing, whether that's locally or uh, right now in the what's going on in the wars. We lift this up in prayer week after week. Concern for the people that are suffering under what's happening. Even if the
I
Iranian
like that you talk
regime, for
about like our
example,
own
is
house
committing horrible
is in
atrocities,
disarray,
there's
and
still going to be a lot of innocent people hurt through what's going on
putting
right
it
now, and
mildly. Well,
that's
and what's
weighing heavily on
concerning
their hearts
too
for sure.
is that people are claiming Christianity as theirs and using Christian rhetoric and really creating this whole thing that this is what all Christians
Putting it
want,
mildly.
that they speak for Christians, that people who disagree with them are heretics, and it's just it's a really concern, and that's not new for Christian history, of course, but when you get it involved at a national scale and with the military, that gets to be very concerning. And when I'm reading your article here talking about this idea of assisting or supporting Israel, but
Very.
Israel, the country or the state of Israel, is not the same as the people of Israel. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, and a lot of that, it goes to Genesis 12, where if you bless Abraham and Abraham's descendants, you will be blessed, and if you curse, you will be cursed. Um, I was just listening to one of Tim Whitaker's podcasts. I know you had him on very recently, and he was just talking about like how people are making an entire theology with world ramifications off of one verse in one book throughout the entirety of Scripture, and it's kind of wild that in itself. But this idea, like God promised Abraham this that he would become a great nation. A little bit later on, a few chapters later, God promised Abraham that um, Abraham's soon-to-be numerous descendants, being the people Israel, would be a blessing to the world. And yeah, in that chapter 12, those who bless will be blessed; those who curse will be cursed. And first of all, I think that's more of a reflection of the
No,
time and
it's
the people who
okay. I
wrote
mean,
it.
that's a
I think the
good,
heart of
like,
God is still very much there.
taking
That
it's
we are
building
to
a
bless
Christian,
those
like you said, a
around us.
Christian
Like,
Zionist theology off
yeah,
of
I'm gonna
supporting
restart that thought.
a chosen people. There's a lot of self-selecting is chosen going on.
Yeah,
Is what I'm really gathering from a lot of what's like the chosen people of the United States. Like they're gonna go help. Like there's a lot of, and again, it's so narrow because I don't have I my
well, yeah,
friends that are in the Jewish community. I Not everybody, not this is not like a ubiquitous Jewish dream, and neither is it for Christians either, is what I'm trying to clarify. Sorry, I do feel like I cut you off.
yeah. Well, and kind of, yeah, and kind of back to the question that you had just asked. The people Israel being the Jewish people, and they're not a monolith. There's a lot of differences, and within their own communities, some of them view the state of Israel as their homeland, and their God. I don't want to say God given, right? That sounds kind of But, God promised them that. Some will say that, no, this doesn't really reflect who we are as people, and that's more of just a nation state. But in any event, God's promise there is so much more broad than a nation state. God's saying, if you were to bless God's Jewish people, and that I don't know if I necessarily believe in the theology of punishment and reward based on that, which obviously some of our leaders do. Mike Huckabee very much does. Um, Specifically with the nation state, that you can't even criticize it, because if you're criticizing it, that is considered cursing, apparently, which I think is asinine. But it's more about the people, the greater people. And then as we go throughout the scriptures, both the Gospels, the epistles, that blessing is to extend beyond the Jewish people. So it's starting first with, be a blessing to God's chosen, vessel. And I've also heard it very well put. I think it was Karl Barth who said, God chose Israel so that Israel can choose others. And I'm not speaking Israel here, I'm talking about the people, the Jewish people. God chose them to choose others to be a blessing to the world. And I believe many of them are really, really, really trying to live into that as much as they can. There's so much I can learn from the Jewish faith, so much I want to learn from it. But yeah, before I can go criticizing their own internal policies, and I've got my critiques of the current administration over there.
It is, and it's very scary.
The harm that's being done in Gaza, all that.
You start messing with religion and the
we've got our own
states,
house in disarray here,
because, like you said, it's a nation state issue, not a
I'd
people
like to
issue.
Get working on that.
Thing, like here in the United States, it's like, what? Then how? Of course, you see, obviously, them promoting the Christian nation, Turning Point USA, the fireworks, like this whole fanfare around a lot of Christian symbolism. And there's a number of folks that don't mind. Actually, they encourage, they're excited about this idea that this is an Armageddon. This is the holy war. It could possibly lead to the rapture or to Jesus returning. Can you talk about the rapture theology and where that came from?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, the rapture theology, which is part of a greater theology, dispensationalism, it might be what most, especially outside of the church in America, think is Christian theology, but it's never been a part of the mainstream of Christianity. It didn't exist for 1800 years at all. There were some hints that there might be some sort of I'm trying to remember what it was. I'll get back to that. It really came to fruition with John Nelson Darby, an Englishman. He fell off his horse, hit his head, had a vision. And this vision, he saw the world. And it wasn't all his original ideas. He was just taking some of these fringe ideas that were never part of the mainstream. And he kind of took it and ran with it. And one of his followers, Schofield, then created the Schofield Reference Bible, where in First Thessalonians, he put this note below it that this is when believers get raptured up. And it was the verse where the trumpet blows and the faithful will meet God in the sky, essentially. And it's a very cryptic verse that a lot of scholars to this day don't know entirely what it means. But it's one verse out of the entirety of Scripture. And this is where the whole idea of being raptured up, left behind, comes from. But it's not a historic Christian belief. The Catholic Church does not support it. The Orthodox Church does not support it. Most Protestantism does not support it. This is a minority view, but this minority view has a very strong hold within our national politics. This specific version of born-again Christianity, not all born-again Christianity fits within this, but that specific version, we find it in Mike Huckabee, Mike Johnson, Doug Wilson, who is, from what I understand, a self-anointed pastor, who is the pastor of Pete Hegseth. I mean, it may be a small view, but it's got enormous power right now. And they believe that what's happening both in Israel, in Iran, is kind of a precursor to Jesus coming back and rapturing the believers. And part of this, we must support Israel, comes from this, because not because of they love the Jewish people so much that they want their Jewish people to have a home free from persecution. That would be wonderful. But because this all must happen for the Christian believers to be raptured up to heaven while the rest of the world faces trials and tribulations, and all those that, in their view, that don't repent will spend an eternity in eternal conscious torment. And it's like, how is that love? That is using the Jewish people and their
Right.
place in
You know,
history
it's
as
interesting.
pawns.
George Washington said
That's
that
not standing with a people called Israel.
actually
That's
in
using the nation state
Tripoli,
for
Tripoli, he's
your
like
own
that.
purposes, and
The
I
United
just find that to
States
be funny.
is not a Christian nation. It's not a religious nation. We don't have any religious enemies, particularly Muslim. And what's really particularly interesting, is like he also was the one to create the chaplain corps. So it's like we're talking about military ministers, tax-paid clergy, which intersection of church and state, which it has been fought down in the court. Back in the 80s, some Harvard folks tried to sue because they thought it was their taxes were going to a religious figure, and the Supreme Court struck it, said that it was because of the unique nature of the job of being in the military, that you have given an oath to possibly die for your country, you should be supported with spiritual care provided by your employer, which is in this case the U.S. military. So really weird, finicky things about the chaplain corps. I don't actually remember what I was going to say. I'm so sorry. But George Washington, that's where it started. He was the one to start the chaplain corps, had, mainline Protestants banging at the door to get in and be the first wave. But within 3 months, he was advocating for a Unitarian, or maybe it was a Universalist. I can never remember. But because he wanted to make sure that it just did not become this Protestant Christian army. He was like, you know what? Like, throw in, and the Protestant mainline weren't happy about it. And he was like, that's not the point, because we're not trying to create a theology. I just need spiritual people in the room to stop you guys from drinking and gambling and like all the things that come from war, behaviorally, and the PTSD, and like the significant things. And also to provide services and rituals and things like that. But again, it was not about converting souls or fighting for anyone. And it's really jarring to me to watch someone like Pete Hegseth hop online and record videos from the DoD's Facebook page and weave. He talks about George Washington starting the chaplain corps as if and then leaves everything else out about it, but just to weave in that Christian nationalist, like, see, even George Washington knew how important, knowing God was. And it's like, he did, but you're making it seem like this is something that, it's just a very fascinating line that chaplains walk, and clearly is now a concern because they can get weaponized very quickly. I also wanted to bring this up with you just in terms of like patterns, but I recently read a book, and I wish I had it. It's like show. But it's, oh my goodness, it is called Aryan Jesus, Christian Christian theologians during Nazi Germany. But it talks about this institute in Germany, and I'm not going to be able to pronounce, obviously, the German one, but it was the Institution of Jewish Eradication in German Christian Life, and that it was all about de-Judifying Germany. And not only Germany, but going through the New Testament and pulling out all of anything that could make Jesus Jewish, and like they de-Judaized it, and that's what they called it. They're like, oh, the de-Judaization. Can't even pronounce it, but it had a nickname, and or they talked about how Jesus couldn't possibly be Jewish because he spoke out against the Jews, so he was above Jewish people. They did the same thing with Paul, that Paul spoke out against the Jews, therefore he must not be Jewish. They created something different and new, and that they already had the Renaissance, medieval paintings of a white Jesus and kind of, a European Jesus. But this is where they really took Jesus and separated him racially and theologically from Bolshevik Jews, and then it became a very racial, ethnic. It just got so ugly. And the thing that concerns me about it is exactly kind of what you and I were talking about earlier. Um, that that was very deliberate, because you cannot understand the New Testament without Second Temple Judaism. And I want to give you an opportunity to explain. I know I just talked for like 3 minutes. Sorry, guys. I typically try to put it on the guest, but I needed to build all that up. Um, but I want to hear you talk about the Second Temple Judaism and what that is. Help us for those who haven't been to church in a minute.
So I'll kind of first respond to what you built up there and some of the danger I'm seeing with that, and then kind of answer the actual question of that. What you just shared about what they were doing in Germany at that time was an extreme version of what's really kind of been happening in many ways since Augustine in the fourth century, but especially getting later and later, especially since Martin Luther and onward, of stripping Christianity from its Jewish roots, becoming something more and more distinctly different. Jesus never rebuked Judaism. He had issues with the way the temple was being run in his time, but that was an insider conversation of, like, I have issues within the United Methodist Church at times. I mean, that's just an insider conversation that people have. He wasn't rebuking the religion. Paul never said he wasn't a Pharisee anymore. Um, Paul was very much still a Pharisee. Like, they weren't. Paul was saying you didn't have to become Jewish to be a Christian, but he was never separating it from it. Judaism is the core of where Christianity came from, and when we completely separate it from that, we're kind of making up our own religion. A Christian faith that is not rooted in the Jewish understanding is essentially out of the sky. I mean, it's been made up. And I know it's kind of a strong statement. Some people will go, whoa, what's he talking about? But Jesus never rebuked any of that. So what is that period? Well, there's a handful of different periods within Judaism, but they built their temple in the first monarchic period under, I guess it was built under Solomon, but it was King David that had the vision to build a temple for God. And they were a unified country at this point, and um, they got the temple going in Solomon's reign, and then there were some problems, and the country ended up splitting north and south. The north retains the name Israel, but most people refer to it as its capital of Samaria. And then the south was the tribes of Judah, and I think Benjamin was the other tribe there. And they went by the name Judah, and Jerusalem was their capital, and that kind of became where we get Judaism from now, where the name Jewish comes from, Judah. Um, well, the north fell to Assyria in the 700s BC, and not too long later, the south, Judah, fell um, to Babylon. All the people were exiled. The temple was destroyed. Life as they knew it was shattered. And this was such a pivotal moment in their theology. Like, so much of understanding their identity as the hardships faced in this time and getting back. And so, through once Persia took over Babylon, Persia made a deal with some of the leaders of the Jewish people, and they ended up going back to their land and getting reestablished. When they got reestablished, they rebuilt the temple. This is Second Temple Judaism. Probably one of the reasons why this is so lacking in so much of Protestantism is most of the books that reflect the Second Temple period of Judaism are the books that the Protestants threw out of the Bible. We frequently refer to as the Apocrypha. Like the books of definitely First and Second Maccabees, there was 4 of those books, really kind of share some of the narratives and the ideas that were coming forth within the Jewish leadership in that time. Resurrection as a Jewish theology didn't exist until this time. There was no resurrection. When you died, you just went to Sheol, which was the resting place of the dead. All went there. But they were struggling with this belief of, well, God made all these promises in the Torah to us, that if we do God's will, we will be blessed, and if we go astray from God's will, we'll be cursed. But there were a lot of people who were doing God's will that were still dying young, dying without getting the ripe old age and with all the blessings that they believed they were promised. So they kind of had this revelation of, all right, so either God's promises are full of shit, or we believe God's promises are still true, they must happen post-mortem. And that's kind of where the idea of resurrection in Jewish thought began. And that was, you can trace some of that in the book of, I think it was First, if not First and Second Maccabees. You'll find Maccabees in the Catholic Bible. You'll find it in the Eastern Orthodox Bible, but you won't find it in the Protestant Bible. Now, the Jewish people don't consider that part of their Bible, but it's still very much part of the history that shaped how it informed the theology that led up to Rabbinic Judaism today, what led up to Jesus, what led up to what became the 4 sects of Judaism in Jesus' time, which were 2 of them most people know, the Sadducees and the Pharisees, but there's also the Essenes and the Zealots. The Zealots were, your Antifa. They were going to take it by force. They were the Bolsheviks. They were going to overthrow it. They wanted to overthrow Rome, get them out, and they were going to use any means necessary to do it. The Essenes kind of had the more Amish approach. We're just going to live off of society, kind of do our own thing. But the Pharisees were the ones who were kind of active in everyday life. They were the ones who believed in this resurrection because they were using the theology of God made promises. We believe these promises to be true. They were upheld in the prophets. We're going to acknowledge this, and this has to be the way, because otherwise God's a liar. Now the Sadducees, they were the more conservatives. To them, the Word of God was the Torah and nothing beyond it. So no resurrection in Torah, there couldn't have been resurrection at all. So they didn't believe in resurrection, period. So this leads us to the time of Jesus, the time of Paul. When they speak of the resurrection, there was already this expectation from Pharisaical Judaism that a great resurrection would happen at the end of days. And it wasn't like a one-time thing, like one person would be resurrected. John Dominic Crossan talks about this all the time whenever he's being interviewed in his books. Of it would have been completely an asinine thought for a person, a Pharisee like Paul, that the resurrection was just Jesus and that was it. No, this must be starting something beyond, because this was in their expectation. There was going to be a great resurrection, and Jesus simply started it. But the Pharisees didn't believe, or the Sadducees didn't believe in that because it wasn't the Word of God. These arguments might sound similar to arguments in Christianity today of this can't be allowed, it's against God's Word, or this must be. It goes back to the same thing. And then also, it's like Paul most likely did not believe in hell because that was not part of that Second Temple Judaism belief. God would not resurrect someone that has already been in the resting place up to life to then send them to back down to eternal death. It was, their belief was that if you were resurrected because you were one of the ones who were faithful. So when Paul speaks about death, he's speaking about actual literal death, that you will die and there will be no resurrection for you. So that's kind of, all that informs, I know we're kind of getting off the Christian nationalism part, but that's kind of the background that informs where our faith comes from, and understanding what Jesus means when he's talking about what people interpret as heaven versus hell, what Paul is talking about. Paul never mentions hell. when Paul's talking about eternal life, he's thinking about this resurrection that was come, and that was not in the original belief of
And
God's word. That came from
the
wrestling with
story
God's word
ties into
through
Christian
reason and
nationalism.
experience.
It's so interesting because, like you said, throughout history there was particularly Protestant, a lot of animosity between Christianity and Judaism, and trying to separate, divorce oneself, and then so now the swing of, you're hearing the phrase Judeo-Christian, which that's also not really a word in history. Judeo-Christian, um, and it's a do you are you familiar too much with the creation of the
Yeah, it's
state
very
of Israel at all?
a little bit. Not. I mean, I know it was the Balfour Declarations how it began, and a lot of it had to do with. There's a certain amount. There was certain Jewish interests that wanted to be there. I mean, it was their ancestry, and there were certain business interests, especially in England and the United States, that wanted an ally over there. And there were definitely Christian Zionist people who were, as kind of what I went back to before, who essentially were using this whole event, this whole creation of this country, and all of the ramifications of it, of people being expelled from their homes, of the people who had just gotten out of the Holocaust looking for a home, um, using all these people as pawns for their own belief that the end times will then be able to be brought to us. And end times, that's not even
Well, and
really
it's
a historic
concerning
Christian view of
because
what
for so many reasons,
how the whole
because
story
like you said,
culminates, anyways.
they've gone rogue. And this past summer, I spent 2 months in Pakistan working alongside Muslim women towards efforts of other Pakistani women, girls' access to education or child marriage. I even did some work with working with women of the Afghan Taliban. There were refugees, and whenever I would engage in these conversations with Muslim women, it was over and over. It was like the Taliban. It's not. They've gone rogue. Like, it's not even Sharia law or Sharia law anymore. In fact, there were quite a number of conservative Muslims who said, "I wish that they would obey Sharia law so they wouldn't be so violent."
Yeah.
And it was just that kind of sentiment over and over. It was just like, maybe they disagreed. How do I want to say this? Maybe they agreed that with the Taliban, that they didn't want the West in, they didn't want all this involvement with the U.S. in their country, or they didn't want all this. And they're like, yeah, we want the West to leave, but that doesn't mean, we want the Taliban to rise, because the Taliban are, like I said, they've gone rogue. It is not even following the socially agreed upon texts, and from what I gathered, was that kind of also happens with
Oh, yeah.
extremism. Is that you have to go rogue because the moderates, especially if it's a core belief of like the whole country, like the United States, secular government, but Christian culturally, and that you can mention the Gospel of John and most people will know at least what you're talking about when you walk into a room or something. But what they were saying was the theology of the Taliban has changed in the last few decades as it's gone further and further extreme, because the theologians they used to have came from institutions, or they were well respected in the larger community, and they felt that they were being extreme and edgy. But then as it kept going, they were losing those types of leaders until they can finally just get a Pete Hegseth of their own. And it's a really as I was talking to them about it, I was like, oh my gosh, there's just so many similarities. And then reading Nazi Germany in 1930s, the creation state, and again, it has nothing to do with the religion of Islam or the religion of Judaism. Or Christianity. It is the radicals are now calling the shots for everybody, is what I'm trying to say. And it's very infuriating, and I feel like so many of us have an opportunity to bond over it, because I'm
Yeah.
very angry. like to see Christianity be used this way in my country and my military. And it's not new to Christian history to do this and use this for just. I'm not. I'm just. I have so. Christianity has its own house in disarray, as you said, and also the United States does. Like, we have things we need to focus. Get out. What are we doing? Like, over there or down south in Venezuela? Let's stop it. Like, boots on the ground here. So, um, my God. You could liberate
Yeah,
so many people out of
liberating the
poverty
people.
by
What about
simply like
liberating our own people?
addressing. It made me so mad when Elon Musk donated something like 20 million to a Wisconsin Supreme Court run or something like that. And I was like, that $20 million could do some you want to like uplift and liberate people, like find people in rural
Yeah,
Wisconsin. Like, you could do something to their church. Like, I don't build a library, build a hospital.
there's a that shows there's a great meme that shows rockets flying in the air in the
Somehow
Middle East
also,
from both sides, and it says on one side of the rockets, "My tax dollars," and the other side of the rockets, somehow also my tax dollars, and then it shows
yeah,
Appalachian
somehow
poverty,
none of
and
my
it's like
tax
somehow
dollars.
none
Yeah.
of my tax dollars.
Um,
Um,
I'm interested. How do I want to ask this? Um, when you think about the next few years, what are some of your most pressing concerns? What are those things that keep you up at night?
oh gosh. Um, See, there's a couple different ways I could answer that because there's the one. Sure, I've got my concerns about what's happening in our country, the freedoms that may be lost, all that kind of stuff. But then I also kind of remember that's like, well, we've been so fortunate living here that we just haven't really had to face a lot of what so many other people in other parts of the world or other times have had to deal with. Um, but remembering that we were never promised that we would the freedom of the United States of America was not promised to us by God. That was just not a thing. In fact, we're promised that if we do God's will, we will face hardship. And so it's like I'm trying to like balance that because I'm so I've been accustomed to 43 years of life here that um, there's things that I value or have taken for granted sometimes that we could face losing, but also try to remember it's like, all right, let me not focus all my energy on the kingdom that of this world when what I'm more concerned about is how the church is being weaponized by certain individuals. Now that's profaning God's name, profaning God's presence in the world, and then being shocked that church attendance is going down. I'm like, I can't imagine why. That to me is like the bigger concern. It's like as a minister, it's like, yeah, I'm going to partake in the political process. I will vote. I will educate. I don't believe as a my personal belief is as a Christian, especially as a clergy person, but that I am to ever serve in an elected office. I don't believe I could serve God and Caesar. Um, so it's like I will do my part, but I got to remember at the end of the day, taking care of my um, our house that's in disarray in Christianity is to me the most pressing concern because that's what I'm called to account as a leader. And I look on with I'm just aghast at what I see of what's being taught. The kind of Christianity that, like, another thing Whitaker has pointed out week after week for good reason is like the glee in Josh Howerton's, the megachurch pastor's eyes when he's talking about the wars in Iran and how we know how this war ends in Ezekiel. It's like, what are you talking about, man? This is an unfaithful reading of Christianity and people are suffering because of it. I'm concerned about that. That kind of being that prophetic voice. I feel like that's where. But if we are talking about more on the ground issues. Yeah, well, I guess that nationalism that's creeping in to the church space because it's affecting both the politics and the church. That's one of my biggest ones, and especially the Flathead Valley is kind of wild. The Ten Commandments billboards that are all over this area and certain churches, and somehow it's tied to the gun shops and capitalism and all the things that have nothing to do with the gospel. In fact, are antithetical to the gospel. I'm like, and now there's this rise of extremism happening with like where youth are being targeted by organizations, and I mean the turning point ones are the lesser, less scary ones. Like we need some sort of an answer to like because the youth are starting to get indoctrinated by these kind of Christo nationalist beliefs that are just
And it's
so antithetical to the Prince of Peace.
it's so concerning because folks like I enjoy listening to Tim Whitaker, and he's a great guest the other day. Um, but and I'm so thankful for his service and his leadership as a creator. But like if you hear his story or other ex-evangelical story, we're looking at in 10, 15 years if people start when people start, we're looking at a whole bunch of pain. Like it's like almost like watching some large scale Jim Jones type thing where it's like I'm so angry about what you're doing right now and blah blah blah, but also whenever this goes, like you're gonna be devastated. Like there's gonna be some major existential,
Yeah.
and then by that point, yes, you are a victim of being part of this, but you will have caused so much suffering that you will have also, been an aggressor or a predator or something. Like you will have by the time, and it's a really, these people won't believe it
Mm-hmm.
until they do, and that was in that book about that. The second book I read about Nazi Germany chaplains was God and Hitler, military chaplains of Nazi Germany, and great book. Both I'll make sure I'll comment that in the caption, um, but she talked about how did it go from chaplains just being really excited to spread Christianity or to quote weed out anybody who threatened Aryan Jesus Christianity, Aryan Jesus, and really excited to over the course of the war, uh, starting to really feel the effects of war, like seeing like their men die, seeing injuries, seeing like really bad things, and then like feeling like, oh, my only role here is to tend to these Christian soldier martyrs. There's like a whole period where chaplains are really writing a lot about how much death they're experiencing and how they feel like that was their purpose at one point, was just for the death aspect. And then towards the end, like they're not even talking about a purpose anymore. And it's wild to watch the enthusiasm drop until finally, like a Catholic, not finally, but one of the stories was how a Catholic German military chaplain just turned, like, no threat whatsoever. He was walking down the street, and in front of a church was a small Jewish child, and a Catholic just killed her and like didn't even think about it. And how does it go? And that's what's scary is once you start war, you can't stop it. Like and they're talking about, oh, this war is so fast, this thing is going, and I'm like, this thing is this is
Nope.
and when you call it a holy war, and Christianity or America may have all the nukes, but there are billions of Muslims that are watching that. Like whether or not they support America going after Iran specifically, but it is global what you just sowed, the seeds that you just sowed across the world when a is. Anyway, I'm talking way too much. I'm sorry, folks.
It's all good. Well, we're kind of fortunate with the fact of the incompetence in the administration. So, but anyway, kind of part of my story that kind of backs up a little bit, like I was like on the much less extreme version of where like Tim Whitaker's story was. I wasn't always Methodist. I grew up Catholic, and then I did like the non-denominational evangelical thing, megachurch thing for a while. I was a member of a church in South Carolina that, when I was there, at 8,000 regular attendees, and then they ended up with like 8 campuses across the state with 30 something thousand people, like massive influence. And then I moved to Austin, Texas, and I was part of 2 different churches there. One of which I still think pretty highly of. One of which I do not. I've seen a lot of harm done at that one, and it's like we didn't have quite the extreme. We weren't talking Christian nationalist stuff. In fact, a handful of people there were probably it was probably close to a 50-50 split politically. But it was more of like the quiet stuff, the stuff that I didn't realize until I was like out of there. It's like the purity culture stuff. We didn't shame anyone, but it was still kind of talked in a way that's like the damage was just being done more quietly, more softly. We didn't believe in, the United States had any sort of specific role in God's plan in that kind of Christian nationalism sort of way. We didn't believe that it had to be ruled by Christians and Christians only, and it was a country for Christians and Christians only. Nothing like that, but it was still kind of this underlying. It's like everyone was suspect if that was out in the world. And one of those churches was part of the church planting network that Mark Driscoll started from, what was it, Acts 29. And yeah, that was part of my story. I used to read Mark Driscoll's books. Now I look at that, like what he writes and says, and I'm like, man, this, I don't like when I'm, an imperfect vessel myself. I don't like to poke at other people as if I'm on some sort of high place and can point at others on how they're doing their pastoral jobs poorly. But some people are causing harm. And yeah, Driscoll's one of those people. And some of the other, like, if you're gleefully excited about the war in Iran because prophecy is being fulfilled, which, first of all, it's not how prophecy works, but also it's causing harm, and that needs to be
Yeah.
called out.
That
That's some of the disarray in our house.
and for like again, the White House wasn't it really hasn't clarified why we're over there. Like it's like okay, just to get rid of the regime. Okay, no, we're going total warfare because there were nukes. No, there weren't. Like there's no clear story, and that's what makes it sound like really even that much more disingenuous when you do invoke God and religion in the midst of having a very unclear strategy, publicly at least, is that if you're invoking God, like it feels almost like it's not feels it is it's very much exploitative from the leadership being like, oh no, this is all for God, don't ask too many questions back here, you don't, no, because if there was a clear answer, like it, and it just feels like the bait and switch, and it breaks my heart for so many people who are fully into that, even though they're, I'm angry too. But what was the thing that kind of made you question the community you were a part of?
Honestly, it's not actually how I ended up being separated from it at all. I was trying to do a church plant in Tennessee, and I was engaged and then got disengaged. And I'm talking about like engaged, like for marriage. And that just kind of like just derailed everything I was doing, and I just kind of was
Yeah.
like mad at God for a while. That's kind of how I felt, and it was just kind of just separation, and it was also part of it was just pragmatic. I was like, well, if I ever do this work again, I need more of a connection than one megachurch 1,000 miles away. I need support, and that's why I'm like, maybe I should check out the denominations, because when I lived in Tennessee, I kind of moved there with this thought process that had been part of my ex-Catholic life that all the institutions were beyond repair. It's like I just do not believe in any sort of institution. I mean, I still believe to a certain degree that we're supposed to be more of a movement than an institution, but that's for another conversation. But so I just I was like anti-denominations at that point, and until this all happened, and especially because in the couple years that I was in Tennessee before this breaking point hit, I was seeing different friends who were one was Lutheran, one was Anglican, some were Presbyterian, like doing really cool outside the box things I didn't think was possible in a denominational setting, and realized that I needed to take my own blinders off that not everything's as clean cut as I thought, clear cut. And my theology was more Wesleyan anyway, so I started and finished that exploration with the Methodists. I remember Duke offered me a Methodist scholarship, even though I was just exploring the possibility. I wasn't Methodist yet. I was not confirmed, or I mean, I was baptized, confirmed Catholic, but I was not like welcomed into membership in a Methodist church at that point. Just doors just opened in weird ways, and it was less of like some sort of thing that turned me away from before to just experiencing a different way. I was able to then look back and go, oh, okay. Now, one mega church that I still had a lot of, I was connected with for a while. I was doing the church plant on behalf. I still I don't know what they're like now because it's been so long, but I still respect a lot about them. They're not. I wouldn't put them in that problematic category like I would with some of these. I just have a little bit of differences in theology now than I did
Right.
then.
And that's again the hardest bit to explain is, especially as a Christian, being angry at Christian nationalists. Or I get really, I've seen it quite a bit of how this could damage, quote unquote, the brand of Christianity moving forward, if that's how people associate it. But I don't know. That feels a little doomsday. I mean, we did the same exact stuff, not same exact, but pretty similar during the Civil War. A lot of rhetoric. So this is, um,
We've been doing
yeah,
it for
yeah,
1700 years.
yeah. So really since constant. So this isn't new. In fact, I think a lot about Erica Kirk and Constantine's mother, Saint Helena, a lot, and how he sent his mother to go campaign on behalf of the empire to mother it. And I was like, oh, like Erica Kirk. Yeah.
Wow, I did
Oh, that
not
was
know
a
about
big
that.
deal.
That
Yeah,
makes
he
sense then.
it's one of the first things he did. Gave her a whole, they had the whole trumpets and the banners, and she was doling out. She probably had some gifts, but like bread and fruit and stuff, and to really take on this like Virgin Mary suffering woman role. This is
No
no
pyrotechnics.
pyrotechnics at the time, no, but they did have fanfare. Like it was like a whole thing. And I
Oh
didn't
yeah.
come across that story in the context of Erica Kirk. I did it in the context of how did women expand the Christian empire throughout Christian history. That was the course, and it was a it was a great
Yes.
course. Not even expand the empire, but like how did they further Christianity with notably. And that was it
That sounds
was
amazing.
yeah yeah. Let me go
That
find the
course.
syllabus and
Now,
I'll send you that book list. But don't let me forget. It was, and that was just one of those things. And then I like, think about as I was watching Erica Kirk after Charlie's death, I was like, oh, this is like Saint Helena vibes. Like this is, or Helena. I don't know how particular denominations pronounce it,
yeah,
um, but this whole fanfare,
we're in Montana,
yeah,
so tell
yeah, right. Like it's Helena. Um, but again, the playbook doesn't change, man. Like it's scary that they'll just keep using things. But as we get close, I really appreciate you hanging out with me. Can you tell us where can folks read or learn more about your work?
well, at this point, like as far as like out in the public sphere, besides just like my personal Facebook and Instagram accounts, it's right now it's mainly the blog Misfit Minister That's .substack.com. And and I try to weekly put my sermons into prose and put them up there, but I'm catching up. I got a little behind, but then I try to put out other things as well, and that's kind of where I'm starting. I'm hoping to in I don't know, in the next few years, probably write a book. Um, I've got a few different ideas on that, but the I'm toying with starting to do more of some sort of a vlog type idea, whether it's like, a solo podcast or just something to. I've been toying with the idea of Theology Thursdays.
Yeah.
I love alliteration. So, but right now it's just the Substack mainly. Or I mean, my Instagram is I think Jon_U_misfit minister, something like that. And John's with for those who are just listening and not watching. There's no H in John, Jon. Ironically, for what we were talking about today, it's the Jewish spelling of John. I learned that more recently. That was not why I was named that. Just happens to be the case.
I am really thankful for your work, for your ministry. It is such a ideal. It it feels so much bigger than just right versus left. This feels really, really big. And I am thankful to have connected paths with you and look forward. I hope to have
Yeah.
you in the back in the future and to be allies out in the Montana community together because my God, this is much bigger than
And if you're in the
typical
Flathead
religion.
Valley, come
Yeah.
connect with us at 10 a.m. on Sundays at Whitefish United Methodist. Got to
Alrighty.
plug it, right?
You gotta plug it. You gotta do it. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And again, I hope y'all enjoyed that conversation with Reverend Jon Umbdenstock. You were awesome. And United Methodist pastor, Whitefish, Montana. Folks, let me know, what did you think of that podcast conversation? Are kind of ringing any bells with you? You have any other concerns? Did you know much about Second Temple Judaism? I appreciate these deep dives. I'd like to have you back on to talk about this stuff at a different time. But until then, y'all, this is Follow the Leader. I am your host, Lee Larson. And until next time, see ya.